My name's Robert Jones, and I've got a 1977 TR7 RV, and I picked this bike up a year ago. It came to my ownership, but I live in Boone, Iowa, and this bike was bought brand new, we think, in Ames, Iowa. And it's always been in Boone. It's been owned by at least 3 guys that I can think of, and the fella I bought it from, I traded off a modern Triumph, a 2020 Speedmaster I owned. He wanted that bike, so I got this bike and some cash from him. The bike needed an overhaul, and so it was smoking real bad, and I came up with some ideas with the help of Richter Machining. AJ's been wonderful. Another buddy of ours in the Boone Triumph community came up with a couple of ideas, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But it's just kind of a cool old bike, and it was my idea to have a bike that I could ride on the highway at 70, 75 mile an hour, have good braking. You've got front and rear disc brakes on these, and the 5-speed is kind of a nice bonus, I guess. But, it's not as important as just having a good smooth running 750, and I think we pulled it off. I just got 560 miles on the break-in. I just rode it down here from Boone to Marnie, and that was 110 miles or so, and I'll be riding home later today after I have a good time and spend some money here. So, about the bike and the build, I guess we can just start at the top end. AJ came up with a notion that maybe I'd like to do a 6mm valve stem, the 6mm conversion, and the Beehive springs. Lighten things up there a little bit. And I thought, yeah, that doesn't sound too bad, and let's try that. So we got that in there. Another buddy said, well, you might as well put some billet rods in there instead of the old ones. And so I got some R&R rods in it. We did have to bore 20 over, and a new set of pistons and rings and everything to go with that. But AJ did top shelf work on the machining.
Thank you.
You did. It's great. And so,
and then we did a balance with all the new components.
Yep, with all those new components, and I said we got to do a crank balance. AJ worked his magic on that. He said it was one of the best cranks as far as getting down to those tolerances, and which I don't fully understand the math behind the crank balance.
Yeah, I don't 100% understand it either, but I know the goal is under a 1/2 ounce, and this was, I think, like 0.2, which is as low as I've ever, and left to right just matched 100%. And I actually had to spin it I think I ended up spinning it 3 times to prove to myself that it was right, because I thought, no way, this has got to be an error. And I just kept spinning it. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing. So yeah, this is the most balanced balance I've ever done. How about that?
Which, everybody wants to talk about the co-op and Meriden and the oil and frame bikes not being as good. And I own 3 other vintage bikes, a 69 and a couple of 65 Triumphs, and the oil and frames always get a bad rap, and all the shenanigans that were going on in the co-op, I guess. But I thought it was kind of interesting that we had a crank that came out and looked balancing out that nice. But anyway.
Well, and the head was in great. I mean, that was one of the nicer heads I've ever. It was a perfect candidate for the 6mm. I mean, it went so smoothly.
Right.
And then, I mean, and I wouldn't even say anything bad about the cylinders. And them needing done wasn't really a big deal.
Well, and it's interesting because the odometer now only shows 9,300 miles on it. I bought it with like 82 maybe, and it it's not a high mileage bike itself, but it just wasn't cared for. The story behind the bike is the guy that bought it new. He'd let just about anybody ride it. When I recommissioned the bike in 2020 for the fella that I bought it from, you know, stuff like the oil, or excuse me, the air cleaner gasket, or not the gasket, but your little flange, your rubber flange, it was gone. The oil was spilled. The carb was dirt. It sat for several years just in a dirt floor garage, you know, open to the elements, you know, a wide open door, got snowed, rain, whatever. It was just kind of neglected. The paint's original, of course, it held up really well. But,
oh, yeah, I want to show that because I love the way it's got some nice character to it.
The chrome and everything is all original too. I haven't replaced any of that stuff. But like I say, going back to the recommission, the guy that owned it brought it to me, and the front and rear calipers were froze, non-functional. Shocks, I replaced the rear shocks here with this last rebuild, but I meant to say the front forks, they were leaking, and all the typical, you can imagine, stuff was wrong. And so I went through it in 2020 and got it running nice and stopping nice, and the only problem was it just smoked like a banshee. It just was terrible. And if you put it on the side stand while idling, it was 30 seconds you had oil pouring out of the drive side exhaust pipe. And of course it had the big cigar, whatever you want to call them, big ugly stock mufflers. I had to get rid of those, but
yeah, these sound amazing.
Yeah, those are Braturos, and I was pleased with them. When I opened the box, they were exactly what I was hoping. I like the fact they don't show the weld here, and they weren't any more expensive than anywhere you could pick stuff up here in the States. That was surprising too, but I'm kind of trailing off on the whole thing. It just low miles, but needed a rebuild. It was a neglected bike, and it just kind of fit the whole mold of build something that will go 70 miles an hour, has turn signals, has good brakes, keep my wife happy, you know, I'm safe,
safe,
safer,
yep.
You know, so I'm wearing my neon colors and a helmet, of course, and
well, and like you kind of pitched it to me when you first said something about, you know, calling it a sleeper, where, you know, nothing's going to be changed visually really, but it's just going to be built proper on the inside. And
right.
I think,
and I guess, yeah, going back to the power plant for a minute, I did forget to mention that it's running 650 cams and not the
the
not the
detune
750 cams, and that pepped it up quite a bit. Along with I'm also running Kibble White push rods, and the whole valve train. While that's not going to make a new bike, you know, in and of those few components, when you add it all together with everything else we did, it really pepped the bike up. It's got really nice throttle response.
I was going to say, that's what I noticed immediately, was it just revved so freely and so quickly, but it didn't sound gutless either, though. You know, there's still some torque to it, there's still some mass there, but it just spun up so freely. You know, it didn't act like it was fighting itself, which that is what always makes me happy. The other thing that I wanted to mention too, though, is you put your engine together. You know, I did the machine work, but you built your engine. And then you also got to see how convenient. I have to plug Dan's stuff every time, but you ran one of Dan's transmission kits.
Speed kits.
Yep.
And I bought a ton of parts from Dan, pistons and rings, and also the main bearings came from Dan.
Yep.
And
so this is a great example of somebody who, you know, you're a smart guy, you take your time, you're patient, you know what you're doing, but you're not an expert engine builder, and you did an amazing job on this, and that's really, you know, that's awesome. That's what I get excited about, because it was perfect relationship where I got to do all the machine work. It was in and out of my shop. You know, you got back to what you needed to do, and you know and now it's an amazing running engine. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What you're saying. It's only my second engine rebuild for a Brit bike, or really anything else other than a Briggs and Stratton. In high school shop, whatever. I mean, I've always been a tinkerer. But that said, this is my first twin rebuild, and the only other rebuild I have done was a 69 Trident. So my first rebuild I decided to tackle was a triple, which...
Would you recommend that?
No, I wouldn't. They're just a whole nother animal. They're cool in and of themselves. I don't own the bike, but you know, you can think about that whatever you wish. I traded it off. For
Interpret that how you will.
Yeah. Take that however you want. And a couple other things I need to touch on, AJ, are I'm running Tri-Spark.
Oh yes, of course.
And I really am a believer in Tri-Spark. There are some who poo-poo Tri-Spark a little bit because everything is contained here. The brain and everything is within your
points cover,
and you don't have a black box. It really simplifies things. However, I guess Tri-Spark did run into some trouble with overheating and whatnot, circuitry, all the electronics that go into the chipboards, whatever, but they've cleaned all that up.
Yep.
This thing runs, idles, it's just amazing. I'm really sold on Tri-Spark. And I also, talking about electrics, I upgraded the charging system. I got rid of the diode, the Zener or Zener, depending on what part of the country you're in, and the rectifier, and just went with actually I did use Tri-Spark's offering of them. What do they call it? MOSFET or MOSFET.
Yeah.
Rectifier. Got one of those on there, and went with a 3-phase alternator, or stator, excuse me, and a new rotor just as a matter of course. So it's got fresh magnets. And I'd already rebuilt all this other stuff, so the main function, or the main focus over the winter was getting this engine recommissioned. Everything else had been done, and so I was really tickled to get the bike from the guy with his history and with the potential that I saw, what AJ saw, what another friend of mine saw. Oh yeah, the other thing that one of my buddies saw and said, hey, you ought to try this, is I added a tooth, went to a 21 tooth drive sprocket off the gearbox, and then I went down to a 45 tooth instead of a 47, so it gives me a lot more zoom down the road, and really...
I was gonna say, did you notice at all on taking off? Like, was it...
It's not bad.
You don't have to slip?
Maybe a little.
Yeah, but it's not to the point where you're not gonna be able to, you're not gonna stall it on a hill or anything.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, the 2020 Speedmaster was a 6-speed, right? And boy, when you let that clutch out, you were like, whoop, and you know, you were up to 25 mile an hour before you needed a shift, and then that wasn't even high revs, but it really kind of, you could tell you had a slow launch with that.
Yeah.
It's not really that much different. I noticed a little bit of difference between some of my older 650s, but it's
worth
worked
it.
out really well.
Yeah.
So instead of a 20 and a 47, I got a 21 and a 45 for my sprockets, and that really worked out nicely. I put 410 K81s on it, which is what the 79 T140s had, whereas these were spec'd out to have like a 350 or a 325 front tire, and
it looks way better with that.
Yeah, and I had Baxter Cycle balance these when they mounted them for me. Usually I mount my own tires on just my little putt-putt bikes, but this one I was trying to achieve that road worthiness, and I think we did it.
Oh yeah. Actually, would you mind just starting it up for us?
Oh sure.
And then we'll do a little ride here in a minute. But I just want to see you get it started.
Yep. And I also did go with a one last upgrade was I went with a Norman Hyde 7-plate clutch.
Oh yes.
And so the idea behind that is you're supposed to use 650 springs, which I think I'm going to buy a set today, which it gives you easier clutch management. I don't mind it. It is a tight clutch right now because I'm running the 750 springs. The Norman Hyde kit instructions said you could run the 750 springs with the kit if you just back them off. But
a little bit.
The whole idea is to run 650 springs, which are lighter, but I haven't done that yet, but I will be probably making that swap. So, a start.
We can edit it if it takes too many kicks.
All right. I'm going to give it a little tickle.
Oh yeah.
She's cooled down after 110.
I was gonna say it's a cold start. We'll keep that in mind.
Not a cold start.
Oh yeah, first kick. That's what we wanted to see.